Welcome everyone. My name is Lulu Moyo and I am the Community Engaged Learning Assistant Director here. I would like to acknowledge other community members in the room today. Dave Lassen, who is the Community Engaged Learning Program Director at the CSC, who will be helping monitor the chat box and setting up the breakout rooms and helping with monitoring the chats and the processions of things today for me. We also have Dan Ryan from the Logan Center, who will be sharing some perspectives with us on this topic, and Connie Mick, who is also from the Center for Social Concerns, who will also be sharing some of her perspectives as well. And we welcome you all as community practitioners to engage with us and share on this topic that we're discussing today of addressing income, housing, and food insecurity. I want to do a little bit of acknowledgement. So this is almost rounding off, or it is rounding off our first complete full month of these digital elves, virtual elves. And so we've had a really amazing time trying to tailor useful resources for all of you to come together and have a space to talk about topics of concern that are very much pressing for this field of community engagement and community engaged learning. And so this month of May, we had the topic of creative community during times of crisis. And next month, we will be talking about tools and strategies for remote programs and events. This week's specific topic, again, as I said, is addressing income, housing, and food insecurity. And so to talk a little bit about next month, we are having a different shift for that first week. So June 4th, we have sent out an email that we are going to be hosting an ELF that isn't directly related to the technology and tools side of things. It's more so a special event tailored to talk about Notre Dame's new announcement of officially opening for the fall. And as many of you know, and as many of you are also preparing yourselves, a lot of institutions and organizations are making announcements to open in the fall and even in the summer. And so what that means for future participation and partnerships, we'll be having a great open forum to discuss what that might look like and what our capabilities and resources are going to be for the fall. So please stay tuned for that. That's going to be a really great opportunity to engage more on that topic. And we really hope that you can be there in that space. Some housekeeping. As usual, this is going to be recorded. You heard the little mobile voice saying this is recorded. And so please, if you do not want to be a part of the video, please just keep your camera off. We share these videos and recordings on our website. And so we've archived some of the past elves. If you haven't been able to join us for any of the other elves, please look on our website and see, you can find a summary of all of the events that have already taken place, as well as each week's recording. So please follow up with that. And then we also want to please keep hearing more feedback about how to help produce better, more consistent events. And so at the end of this event, you can add to a survey, and also feel free to contact myself at lmoyo@nd.edu, as well as Dave Lassen, if you have any concerns, questions, comments that you'd like to discuss further. I would also like to invite you all to participate throughout this event through the chat box. So please type in any questions, comments, concerns. Please also use it as a space to post resources. And so, for example, from other events, people have found it as a great way to link to different community resources and things that they are wanting to get more community members a part of. And so please feel free to utilize that space as your own. And we'll go from there. So thank you again, warm welcome. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you all. To kick us off, I would like to first introduce Dan Ryan, again from the Logan Center.
Thank you, Lulu. I don't have a lot of information specific to this topic, but I thought I could give you a general overview of the situation that Logan is dealing with right now. Logan employs 580 employees, and when all of this got started, they actually furloughed 250 staff. Of the 250 staff, all were offered an opportunity to work in some capacity, but not necessarily the job that they were used to doing. And 50 people took advantage of that situation and said that they wanted to continue working. Right from the beginning, Logan has paid for the entire cost of the person's health insurance, both the part that they would normally be responsible for and the part that Logan pays for, which I think says a lot about Logan's commitment to the staff. They're in the process right now of trying to decide how to get things back in full operation, but they're going very slow, being mindful of all the recommendations of the medical community and the data that's being collected. I'm happy to say that there are 121 individuals that Logan serves either in their group home program or in the supported living program, which are in smaller settings. All 121 of those individuals are safe and no one has tested positive for COVID, so that's very good news. Logan has made plans in case something would happen and we would need to provide care for someone that has tested positive, but thank goodness nobody has. So on the issue of food insecurity, one of the things that Logan has done is develop a special fund specifically for the staff. As you can imagine, many of the staff of Logan are direct service professionals. They do very important work. They do very valuable work, but they're very poorly paid in comparison to many other people that work in different fields. And so I imagine some of those families are feeling a tremendous amount of stress right now. So Logan has initiated this program called Logan Cares. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a day of giving where contributions were matched. All the money went specifically into that fund. I did sit in on a meeting and found out that Logan so far has spent about $600,000 of unbudgeted funding on personal protection and other, cleaning, additional cleaning and sanitizing efforts and so forth. And then in addition to that, there's been a large decrease in the amount of collections from the state and other sources for the services that we've not been able to provide during this shutdown period. So I think that's about all I have to share right now, but I'm happy to answer any questions to the extent that I could.
Thank you so much, Dan. And I think that you've jump-started the conversation off really well. I look forward to hearing more about where your perspective as a community practitioner ties in as we go along and how this area impacts you. But it's great to know that people are on a positive side of stability and security in your organization for the most part. So that's great to hear. Also, I would like to again acknowledge Connie Mick in the conversation in the room. Connie is the Director in Academic Affairs, and she also is the University of Notre Dame's co-director for poverty studies. And so Connie is graciously going to be talking about her research in encampment communities as well as different areas of this concentration. So thank you, Connie.
Thanks, Lulu, and thanks everybody for being here. Lulu invited me to share a little bit of the work that I'm just starting to turn public here. Research that was started with colleagues at the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty, which is a national consortium of, as it suggests, of universities and colleges that have some kind of focus on poverty studies. Our activism sometimes as academics is to be educators and to find out how we can best educate and sort of bridge that gap between community voices and the kinds of social concerns we're studying. We try to really enact that studying in a way that's meaningful and that's useful both to people in the community and those students who are trying to better understand those issues so that they can build careers and lives that that act out issues of justice and make the world a better place. So what we did through this project was try to create a series of case studies that could be used in poverty studies courses. And so the first one is one out of Notre Dame and out of South Bend that focuses on homelessness. Particularly the Main Street encampment that happened around 2016, 2017, just as a slice of that homelessness experience in the South Bend area. As we know, spoiler alert, homelessness did not get solved after those times, and we see it in the headlines today in South Bend. This is a chronic issue for our community and for communities around the world that are trying to understand how to negotiate the common good and how to think about, fair and good uses of public spaces in a way that really helps to honor all these differing needs and helps us live in harmony. So what we did through this case study was what academics do. We tried to listen carefully to our partners out in the community and of course know that it's woefully underrepresenting all the possible voices we could have included there. But there's about 27 different recorded, video recorded interviews of folks who represent some of those different perspectives on this issue. And so it's packaged together there in a way that students can listen, ask questions kind of those videos and do some role playing, try to think, if I were in the mayor's office, what would I do? If I were a resident in downtown South Bend, what would I do? If I were experiencing homelessness, what would I do? What would I think about? What are some possible scenarios? So it's trying to give approximate some of those questions that folks wrestle with day to day, and to bring students into those conversations in a meaningful way. So I hope it's a useful project to folks. It's still a bit under construction, and that's a good thing. That means you can still give me feedback and I can try to make it better. In fact, we'll add a glossary later today. It's still kind of under construction. I'll share real quickly just you can see the opening page here. So it's, taking kind of a case study approach. What is this issue? And this is a beautiful video, I think, of different stakeholders' definitions of homelessness. What is it? What is it all about? And those perspectives, if you have definitions, help us define and consider solutions, right? If we define a problem in different ways, we have different ways of stepping in and responding to it. So it starts with that, and then these three pieces here. The introduction, looking at kind of a timeline, again, just taking a little slice of that experience of homelessness in South Bend and looking at some of the key issues around that encampment in South Bend. There's a map that shows you some of the resources that folks experiencing homelessness utilize on a day-to-day level. Again, thinking of folks who might look at this website both from South Bend but from outside South Bend, kind of introducing them to the context of homelessness in our community. And then the roles section there, again, gives you kind of a different stakeholders perspective to walk through and consider some of the different responses. And an invitation to get involved in the case study approach, developing additional case studies that we could add to this effort. And I should give a huge shout out here to the Office of Digital Learning. They were my partners in constructing this and helping produce some really high quality video. I think this is useful now as well at a time when we have to work remotely. I think the project tried to capture community voices in a way that gives them some durability, so that it's not 10,000 classes of students asking the same questions, but that we now, especially in this time, have some of those responses and perspectives captured in a way that students can still engage in a much more passive way, but still listen at least to some of those community voices at a time when it's harder for us, if not totally restricted, to do the kind of face-to-face engagement that we value. So I will pop a link to this in the chat room now. Feel free to, after this, explore and give me feedback and perspectives. I really would value that, and just appreciate all you frontline workers I see here on the screen. I'm so humbled by all that you do. This was something that I could do, and it's what I do as an educator, is trying to bring students into contact with your voices and try to represent those as comprehensively and accurately as possible. So I hope, here, I'll hit return. So there's the link to that, so you can explore on your own and give me feedback. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Connie. And please, again, as she said, feel free to explore that resource. I also want to just give a shout out to other colleagues that are in the room who will be able to share their experience with this topic and tie in. And so please feel free to bring your expertise into the larger conversation. But with that said, I would love to just jump right on into the 10-minute breakout session. And so I have 3 prompts for speaking points for that discussion. And so just to share those out loud with you, the first one is, how is shelter-in-place impacting your clients' housing security? Did the resources provided in the CARES Act address the needs in your communities? Or another way of looking at it, what was the outcome of state and federal aid for your populations? If you've seen that, what has been the impact of shelter-in-place on food security? All right, so it looks like we are mostly back in the group. Thank you again for participating in the breakout session. I hope it garnered some useful conversation. Again, just to emphasize, some of these questions were coming from a place of acknowledging that shelter-in-place has been very tough and disturbing for a lot of context on people facing eviction from housing because being unable to pay rent and keep up with rent, people in different communities and organizations working with different granted resources from the government and not really sure how to navigate some of those resources and doing with and without, and also there's always food insecurity is a topic that will always be of pressing behavior and pressing nature, but even more so now, and getting food to people in a safe manner and having access to resources. But I wanted to open up the conversation for folks to share out about some topics that they talked about in their small groups.
Well, I'll talk. Hi, I'm Dan Graff. I'm a colleague of Lulu's at the Center for Social Concerns. I'm a labor historian at Notre Dame, and I direct the Higgins Labor Program at the CSC. In our group with Isaac and Chris, we talked, I think, sort of holistically. It seemed like the sort of challenges that are also interconnected, talking about the reduction in the jails and the sort of letting more people out of the jails, but letting them out towards what if we don't have housing, income, or food for them? To talk about our 3 themes, what does that mean? The connections between that and the homeless shelter, lack of the homeless crisis that's happening this week. I asked a question about unemployment compensation and whether the struggles people may have be having accessing that system, and if there were supports in place to try to rectify that. I feel that that's something I consider the press frontline workers right now, and I've been highly grateful to have the South Bend Tribune delivered to my doorstep without a single miss since COVID came. So I'm grateful for that, but at the same time, I don't really feel like I've seen much in the way of stories about people getting evicted in spite of the supposed moratorium, or people struggling with accessing the unemployment that the CARES Act and the various pieces of federal legislation are designed to help them with. So we talked a lot about that. I don't want to speak for Isaac or Chris. I was grateful to be in that small group, but I left with lots of questions to try to figure out how to explore.
Thank you.
This is Rebecca. I can share my video, but you'll see I don't know what's wrong. So that's why I'm turned my video off. But I will say that our group talked a little bit about, food insecurity, and Deborah was in our group. And so that was, her perspective was really valuable, because we had already sort of heard Dan's and then Deborah sharing hers. And she said that food security has not been as big of an issue as Dan said, more like the holistic issues. A lot of Deborah's clients are still working and never stopped working. And so they're dealing more with like the associated sort of mental stress of dealing with or knowing that they're going in places that are unsafe, and not necessarily feeling like the laws are there protecting them, whether they are required to go back to work and then they'll lose their unemployment benefits, but their employers aren't necessarily providing protection for them so that they feel like they can safely go back to work, or just seeing colleagues just sort of disappear and not knowing why, and that being an ongoing concern. And then also the loneliness we're hearing about a lot, of having friends and family members die and not being able to accompany them. So I was really grateful for Deborah's perspective. One thing that Dan brought up that was also an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about was that a lot of the food assistance that is available or has been available is drive up. And so if you don't have transportation, how you overcome that barrier. I don't know if that came up in any of the other conversations, but it is something that I honestly hadn't thought about. So.
I'd maybe just encourage Ian, if you don't mind. He has a great perspective from working in the city and looking at evictions and what's happening, with sort of the pause on evictions, but understanding as well that that's just going to balloon after those temporary holds are lifted. So if you don't mind, Ian, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what you're doing day to day, working with Judy Fox and others on trying to understand that aspect of this time with COVID.
Yeah, sure. So Marty as well in here, Martin Mecklenburg. I work with him, and yeah, we've been working with Judy Fox and some other volunteer lawyers network, some other people who are in the legal and housing related fields, on trying to get resources to people facing eviction so that they know where to go for rental assistance, for example, or what they need to bring to their hearing in order to have a better chance of avoiding eviction, things like that. And yeah, Judy Fox has emphasized that, yeah, there's going to be this wave after the pandemic is over. And so Connie and I were talking about how that's going to be not only bad for tenants, but also for landlords. And then also with homelessness, that's going to be on the rise after this as well. So yeah, housing is going to be a big issue with this.
And if I could add to that, one of the things that we did have to really think about before we hit the pandemic, we already had a housing issue. 1,000 houses in 1,000 days where the houses were not replaced. And then you have Western Manor who turns around and then they bought the property and then they raised the prices and which they have a right to raise the rent. But then you evicted everybody that was in the building. A lot of those people that I know, at least 10 people that was down there at that encampment was from Western Manor Apartments who had a residence before the pandemic. And now they living in tents. And these are our brothers and sisters and citizens of St. Joe County. And this is something that we really need to be a mad press on. How do we eliminate this homelessness situation in our community? Addictions that we have in our community. How do we give them something tangible to be able to hold on to come out of what they're in? Go by just ride by Mario Sims over St. Joe Street by the Transpo and just look at all the people out there. If that don't force us or drive us to come up with some resolutions and help the council and the mayor, then I'm in the wrong business.
So I was wondering, am I off mute? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering how people find out about the assistance that's available. If the legal aid community is working to help people, how is the word getting out? That because we do get a lot of questions. Like I heard that people couldn't evict you, but then people are being evicted. And not even going through the legal process, the court processes of eviction. So that's number one. Then number two, I would be very interested to hear from United Way. United Way got all of this money to help people. And so a lot of us, some of us got money to help people. So, okay, we're thinking, okay, we're helping people pay rent, pay mortgage, pay utilities, da-da-da-da. And one of the things was that we were supposed to refer to other partners, So I'm saying, okay, when our money runs out, where are those partners? Who are those partners? And then when it looked like a lot of people were getting resources to help themselves or their tenants. So how if an entity is getting money from United Way to help their tenants pay their rent if they've lost their jobs, how are they then out in the community looking for help? So if they're not even letting people within their own housing developments know that this resource is available. So that's that whole missing communication thing for me was very, very interesting. So yeah, so what was United Way's intent? I know it was real fast, just like the PPPs and all the rest of it. But yeah, that was a question I had. And then ongoing, who's being provided these resources to actually help the people? So that's the question. And because they said call 211, but when you call 211, it's still like all they have listed is like Portage Township and Little Flower Church. And so then Portage Township is still go here, go here, go here, go here, go here, which, yeah, if places are closed, you can't get documentation. How? So what's in place to help people overcome the traditional barriers that are there? And then now we have this COVID thing. So are people making adjustments to their requirements because of COVID? So yeah, so all of these conversations just raise more and more questions.
Thank you, Deborah. And I want to emphasize those questions, and I hope some people can chime in to answer and address how they're engaging with some of these resources, how their institutions and organizations are coming across and handling this information. I want to also extend more of the questions that are also coming out for me as well, Deborah, what are we exactly seeing our city and state doing to prevent and respond to the outbreak of COVID-19 amongst people experiencing homelessness specifically, and what plans and resources are we witnessing to address income, housing, and food insecurity after shelter in place is lifted? And so also what's happening now, but what are we seeing that's proactive, because the city's rules are changing, the state's and the nation's rules are changing. And so what are we seeing that's policy or action or resource oriented that is going to support communities?
So, you know, we hear about, I'll just speak locally. So in terms of the homeless issue, and so you hear that, okay, this tent city was allowed in one place, and then the owner said no, and then they moved to city property. The city said okay, but then the city changed their mind, and then the city said possibly they would open up. And I don't know why they can't immediately open up the Salvation Army, because it's already housing in there. And then I was reading, I think, an editorial or somebody said they have the weather amnesty place. So why couldn't they just open that back up? Why is it only, oh gosh, here we go with questions again. But weather amnesty, why is it only in the wintertime? And then why is it only at nighttime? If it's 15 below at night, it's still 15 below at 8 a.m. You know, so why do people have to leave the weather amnesty places? And so, yeah, the whole need for the community to listen, the resources be available, because there are plans in place to address these things. There are means available. And so the question still is just, why is it not happening?
If I can probably answer that, Deb, I think we lose focus on the homeless during the summertime, and then we focus on them right when about a week or two before it get cold, and we got to do weather amnesty. And that's the problem. We don't focus on them 365 days a year.
Right.
In addition, the Salvation Army was the center for them to, you know, sleep and stay warm at nighttime, and the city owns the building.
Right.
So there's not to have it where they continue to house individuals. You just would have to put staff in there to maintain it, a case manager, and have social workers to come down and provide services.
Okay.
I'm not understanding why it's so difficult to put this together. And every time, you and I, we have been on committees before talking about the same issue, and you start with a plan, and then the next you know, the plan turns into something else. And doesn't turn about the individuals that we're supposed to be serving. It turns about the organization that's trying to oversee it. And that's a lot of the problem.
Right.
Yeah, I'll add my experience recently with this same issue, Isaac, is that I'm on the jail diversion task force for Faith in Indiana. And, you know, they're looking at holistically. You can't just let all of these people out of jails, and then where do they go? And they know the addictions and mental health resources are part of it, but also housing. And so I think there was deep disappointment that the permanent supportive housing on the west side was shut down by the neighbors, and that it has also been not able to come to fruition in the southeast side. But one of the questions I had in our little committee was honestly like, well, have they looked at the near northwest neighborhood? That's where I live. I wonder if people would be receptive there. And, you know, they, as always happens, they were like, okay, well, you go figure it out because you asked the question. So I contacted Kathy Schuh, who's the executive director of the MNN. And I said, like, you know, have these conversations happen? Can we look at this? Because there's lots of vacant properties in the NNN. It is relatively close to the downtown, and we have a fairly strong neighborhood infrastructure. And she said, nobody's asked us. And she said that that she thinks the reason is because the money right now sits with South and Heritage Foundation. And so South and Heritage Foundation is looking at the neighborhoods where they traditionally have served. And I'm like, okay, well, can we just start that conversation? Like, to me, that seems like a relatively simple barrier to overcome. And I know it's not politically, there's other things, but like, that seems like a silly reason to not be looking at this. Is like, we have a pretty strong neighborhood organization, good like location, because the funding sits in the wrong institution, we're not gonna do anything. Maybe that's something that we can fix. So I agree, Isaac, that it sometimes has to deal with where the power is and where the money is, and things get entrenched and then they don't move.
Okay, let me just say this, Rebecca. I am on that committee, that permanent supportive housing. I've been on it. I am the one who brought the original Oliver project to the South Bend Heritage Foundation. And you're absolutely right. The money is sitting with South Bend Heritage. Portage Rex, the lot right there on the corner that the city owns, was prime on the bus route, like you said, close to downtown. The neighborhood, Tim Scott, and he said the near Northwest said absolutely not. We've talked about that old candy building. Why is it continuing to sit empty? The near Northwest has plans for that building. And that's what we have been getting as the Permanent Supportive Housing Committee from near Northwest, is that they have plans for all of those lots, all of that property, all of those empty rundown buildings around there. They have said no consistently. So I don't know where the breakdown in communication is. Tim Scott's been the person we've had most of the conversations with. Marty, who just left, I think he's gone. He's the president of the near West Side, near West Washington Street, who led in the protest, the new city council person that works in Notre Dame.
Rachel Thomas Morgan.
Yes. They are anti any more permanent supportive housing in their neighborhood. And so we run into this whole discrimination, this whole wanting to know who's living in the neighborhood, what their diagnosis is. You know, you get into a whole lot of stuff that nobody else is asked questions when they're going to build. You see all those condominiums, all that, nobody asked who's going to live there. You know, nobody demanded to know, have any kind of access to any kind of personal information about people. Only when it comes to the poor, people have these responses. So yeah, if you can get with the near Northwest and give up that Portage Rex corner, we'll take it. It is owned by the city. It is zoned properly. Everything could be a go, but the near Northwest neighbors said no. So I don't know who Tim Scott is working with over there and how or why they haven't talked to, but they have their plans for what they want to do over there.
Yeah.
With their sidewalk cafes and, you know, their renovation of the fire station. And again, that whole creation of adding to the homeless problem with that gentrification of that neighborhood. The number of people that they are pushing out of homes and moving new people in. So it is a big, broad conversation that is deserving of a lot more people being at the table, so that these misunderstandings are not made on behalf of somebody else.
Yeah, Deborah, this is really good information for me to have, because I didn't talk to Tim Scott. He's our council person.
Right.
I talked to Kathy Schuth, who's the executive director of the neighborhood organization. So maybe they're not talking to each other.
Right.
So maybe I can help with that conversation and help move that forward.
Yes.
Because that's concerning to me, that Tim Scott spoke on behalf of the neighborhood organization when we have a neighborhood organization. So
if I could add this also, that this is probably the elephant in the room, because the original place where they wanted to move the homeless to was on the southeast side of town. when they first initiated the trailers, which is directly around the corner from my home. And I know the neighbors over there were upset because they were, this is exact words that I've not only heard from the Southeast Side neighbors, some of the Northwest neighbors, and some of the West Side neighbors. When will Notre Dame, after they done moved everybody out of the East Side and helped create this regentrification, when will they take in some homeless or social service areas in that neighborhood? When that happens, people say they will be willing to accept more social service neighborhoods in their area. Because if you really look at the huge portion of the regentrification, near Northwest Side was one, but Notre Dame area on the East Side is the biggest regentrification neighborhood in this city, which pushed out a lot of minorities in that community and moved them to Pacific areas on the East Side of town, the North Side of town, and the West Side of town, that people cannot afford to own homes or even rent to live over there. So when you're looking at the general area of social services in the city of South Bend, how many social service agencies are in the Notre Dame East Side area? I can name 7 on the Southeast Side area within a mile from my house. And if I go 3 miles, I probably can put 15, right? So you're talking about the Plasma Center, you're talking about Broadway Church, you're talking about Life Treatment Center. We can go down the line. What is the balance of the neighborhoods? And that's what most people in the community in the city of South Bend are saying. There is no balance of equality of services to help individuals in our community across our city. Because getting them to, everybody try to use downtown because of central location. Getting them there ain't the issue. Getting them on the buses, all that type of stuff, they can get to the location. So using the Social Security and the license branch that has not moved on the other side of town as a reason why it needs to stay in the general area downtown doesn't make sense to me. And I know I might have stepped on some people's toes, but I'm sorry, that's what I do.
Thank you for that, Isaac. And quickly just to mention, as people are trickling out, we are coming towards the end of our time. So I do want to just acknowledge before people duck out too much more. But again, thank you so much for being in this space, and thank you for taking time to be a part of this.